Wait a sec. Today's a fasting day. What is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic manner. Today I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about two of my most recent fasting protocol ventures, do a little comparison between the two, take a look at some research, and give you my personal experience. Sound like a plan? Good. The two we are going to talk about today is OMAD and ADF. And if you're not up to date on that fasting acronym soup, let's take a quick little walkthrough. Both are pretty self-explanatory, which is good. OMAD stands for 1 meal a day, and there's no calorie restriction, there's no specific time window that you need to fit your food into. It's just 1 meal a day, and usually one big-er meal. Then when we look at ADF, that stands for alternate day fasting. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Eating every other day. You eat a day, you fast a day. You eat a day, you fast a day. You watch the magic happen. We'll talk about the magic in a little bit. Again, there are no specific calorie restrictions here. There are no specific time windows that you need to eat within other than every other day. Both protocols are pretty clear and concise. They don't leave much room for interpretation. 1 meal a day, eat every other day. That's it. So like I said, we will look into some research. We will talk about some personal experimental data around sleep and weight and some blood biomarkers. And then we'll talk about some tips and guidelines that I've learned doing both for a fair amount of time. So first, OMAD, 1 meal a day. In the grand scheme of things, OMAD is just another form of time-restricted feeding. One of the more extreme forms before you get to intermittent fasting. And for this video, the definition of time-restricted feeding is the feeding and fasting window that you follow within a 24-hour period of time. That's time-restricted feeding, and again, for this video, intermittent fasting is going above that. So that would be something as eat a day, fast a day, or something such as a 5 and 2 protocol, where you eat 5 days a week and you fast 2 days a week, something like that. A longer extended fast is what we're going to call intermittent fasting. Back to OMAD. So basically in time-restricted feeding, it is technically a 22 and 2 protocol or a 23 and 1 protocol, and that's fasting 22 hours, eating 2 hours, or fasting 23 hours and eating 1 hour. It's hard to do OMAD if it's not one of those, to tell you the truth. So that's how it's structured, and there are conveniences and inconveniences that come with it, right? One of the positives I found from it is the fact that you don't need to count calories. You don't need to cut out entire food groups. Give up your favorite meals or stick to a bunch of complicated diet rules. Why do you think diets always fail? There's too many rules. Less rules. Now I'd like to point out, this does not mean that you in fact should eat whatever you want. No protocol, no diet protocol, no fasting protocol is going to be able to save you from the metabolic consequences of a consistent, highly refined, highly processed diet. It's just not going to happen. So make good dietary, food choices. And if you want to see some and see how to structure eating for longevity, check it out. Did a whole video on it. Makes it simple. 3 levers to pull. And the last kind of pro that I'll put on OMAD is technically you're going to be spending less time preparing meals, cooking meals, and that means a little less cleanup if you're a tidy person. Maybe you just leave it. I don't know. So now flipping the script and talking about some of the cons of OMAD, we've got the fact that it's challenging. It could take a physical and mental toll on you, the person who's implementing it, especially if you just jump right into it without any kind of progression towards it. And what I mean by progression towards it is slowly cutting your feeding window every week or every month and getting to that OMAD kind of structure. If you're eating ad libitum and doing whatever you want and then you just say, I'm going to eat 1 meal a day, it might work. You might be able to pull it off, but most likely it's not going to stick. It's just human nature. Spent a whole video talking about that too. I'll link it below. Another thing about OMAD is the timing is tricky. In an ideal world, you'd like to eat somewhere in the middle of the day, so you're not starving for too long and you have time to digest before you go to bed, you know, somewhere around the 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. time range. That's an ideal world. But that dinner thing and that being social thing tend to get in the way. Unless there's like some sort of quarantine going, nah, that would never happen. And if you do in fact to choose to have your one meal a day around dinner time, we have to remember that late big meals at night impact sleep and degrade sleep, specifically deep sleep. And degraded deep sleep over a long period of time is a big longevity liability in the long run. So you need to be mindful of that. Those are the challenges. But what does the research say? Surprisingly, a lot of these studies suggest that OMAD doesn't provide many more benefits from a weight loss and metabolic standpoint than the more lenient time-restricted feeding protocols. And when I say more lenient, I mean the standard 16-8, the 18-6, even the 24. That's a colon in the middle, the 20:4. Just clarifying. In a 2007 randomized crossover study, subjects consumed all calories that they needed for weight maintenance over either 3 meals or 1 meal a day. And these meals were consumed between 5 and 8 p.m. So later in the day. And don't forget that point, we're going to come back to it. The results showed that subjects that had that 1 meal a day woke up and had higher plasma glucose levels, a greater and longer sustained elevation in glucose, blood sugar, and a delayed insulin response when giving an oral glucose tolerance test compared to the 3 meal a day subjects. Interesting. Levels of ghrelin, or our hunger hormone, were also elevated in those 1 meal a day subjects. Essentially, they were feeling more hungry, which is a bad thing. And there were a bunch of other biomarkers that were taken, such as fasting insulin, leptin, and BDNF in the brain that weren't significantly changed. Now I want to step out of the study and go back to that mealtime because that was later in the day, and that could be one of the reasons why one big meal at night really affected the glucose levels in the morning, the fasting glucose levels in the morning, because you were digesting more overnight. Also, you probably had degraded sleep. So, my opinion, not fact, not great timing there. More on me? You want to hear more on me? Okay. I have been personally experimenting with a 6-and-1 OMAD strategy for the last, month and a half here. And essentially, I've structured it as 1 meal a day between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. So I have a 2-hour feeding window, or a grazing window, so to say. And that's the structure I follow Tuesday through Sunday. And that day we left out, Monday, is a complete fast. So between my last meal on Sunday and my first meal on Tuesday, I'm hitting about 46 hours of fasting. So it's a mix of OMAD right now, which is TRF, time restricted feeding, and intermittent fasting 1 day a week. So switching it up a little bit, seeing how the body responds. We'll chat about that a little later. Now the transition to this protocol, this 6-and-1 OMAD protocol, was pretty simple because I was coming off 6 months of alternate day fasting, eating every other day. So I wasn't going in cold. I was going in very warm, so to say. And speaking of ADF, let's take a look. Oh, ADF, where do I begin? We've talked about ADF a lot on this channel, highlighted by my recent 6-month fiasco that recently ended about a month ago. It's mid-April 2020 for all of you keeping score at home. ADF is just what it sounds like, eating every other day, alternate day fasting. Like OMAD, this protocol gives you the leisure to eat without any dietary restrictions. And as I noted before, that's not recommended. You should eat good, healthy, nourishing food, not crap. ADF typically comes with longer intermittent fasting periods between meals, typically around 30 to 40 hours, depending on when you finish eating and start eating and that day in between. For me personally, doing it around 6 months, I was averaged in around 42 hours of fasting between meals. This, like I alluded to, would classify ADF as a form of intermittent fasting, while OMAD is really a form of time-restricted feeding. This protocol, as we've touched on in many other videos, which I'll link all below, shows some rather interesting metabolic benefits in both human and animal models. In a recent 6-month human ADF study, participants who followed the protocol showed improved fasting glucose and insulin sensitivity, lower levels of total circulating cholesterol, lower low-density lipoprotein LDL cholesterol, lower VLDL, very low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, both associated with cardiometabolic risk, and lower serum triglycerides. Along with this, it showed some benefits from a cardiometabolic standpoint, reducing systolic and diastolic blood pressure, as well as heart rate, arterial, and pulse pressure, and elevated levels of beta-hydroxybutyrate, or one of the most common ketones. So that right there means you were switching your metabolic fuel consumption from a more carb-based to a more fat-based, breaking down fatty acids and using them as energy. If you want to get into the weeds and all that, check out the videos below. Fasting 101 playlist, how to eat playlist, a ton of content. Check it out. Okay, now let's compare. And I want to look at 3 things here. First, physical changes, aka weight. Then sleep data brought to you by the Oura Ring. And lastly, we'll look at a little biochemical comparison. And that last part is part opinion, part hypothesis, call it whatever you want to call it, just not hard, cold stone, measurable data. First off, research points to weight loss following both of the protocols. Much of this is attributed to the fact that for most, following either protocol will put you in a long-term calorie deficit. You eat less, but after following the protocol for an extended period of time, your body begins to adapt, it begins to adjust, and that weight loss will typically, as you may have seen, start to flatten out, otherwise known as a plateau. I personally saw about 10 pounds of weight loss after a few weeks of implementing alternate day fasting, but then it became pretty stagnant. And just to note, weight loss was not a driver really for implementing the protocol. Now, when I switched to OMAD about a month and a half ago, I saw that weight begin to creep back up to my pre-ADF levels. This was interesting, and I would like to do the experiment to see what would happen if I didn't go from ADF to OMAD and I just went from regular time-restricted feeding to OMAD and see if there was any difference there. Don't have that data now, but I'm also looking for some common links here, as over the past month and a half I really kind of stepped up the strength training, started training a little heavier, so that weight could be attributed to increased muscle mass as well. So not going to get too caught up on that number. What I will leave you with is that both protocols can and probably will affect your weight in a direction that you probably want it to go in. Other things to note, energy levels were pretty consistent. Focus was pretty consistent. I've talked about in the past having an increased focus while fasting. The mornings before I eat on OMAD, I'm, pretty focused and ready to go. And then, I kind of lag off and get a little tired and sleepy after the meal, but nothing too bad. One thing I did notice a difference in and saw a difference in the data was sleep. Sleep has definitely been interesting. And using the Oura Ring, I was able to compile some trends, some data over the months of performing each respected protocol. And this allowed me to see if anything stood out and compare the objective data with the subjective feel. And wouldn't you know it, it did. First, what I've seen from an anecdotal standpoint, and I've talked about this in the past, is the fact that I could fall asleep faster after a feeding day. But on these days that I eat, I have seen that the quality of sleep tends to take a hit. First, I observed this between ADF, feed, and fast days, and now I'm seeing something similar and even a little enhanced when I compare ADF to OMAD. Here are some things that stood out, specifically heart rate variability and low resting heart rate, both being key indicators of recovery. And full disclosure, I'm still trying to figure out if this is directly related to OMAD or if there are some other factors at play. So take this with a grain of salt, if you will. I've seen a drop in heart rate variability, which is not ideal. That is the disparity between your heartbeats. The faster your heart beats, the less disparity, the more activation of your sympathetic or fight or flight nervous system. Not good to be in that state a lot. The more disparity between your heartbeats, that means you're in a parasympathetic state, otherwise known as the rest and digest state. This is where you want to be. So heart rate variability went down. Not ideal, like I said. And secondly, my low resting heart rate, which is that bottom heart rate per minute that you hit through your night's sleep, was elevated compared to ADF. And heart rate, again, is an assay of recovery and restfulness and how hard your body is actually working when you sleep. The lower the heart rate, typically the better. Obviously, there are extreme cases, and those are the outliers, but generally speaking, the lower the heart rate, the lower the resting heart rate while you're sleeping, the more rested, the more recovery, the more efficient your body is. So, went in the wrong direction, elevated after OMAD. And this is something I'm going to personally keep an eye on as I progress through this OMAD protocol for the next couple of months and see if there are any levers that I can pull that can alter the results or tweak the numbers here. To be continued. Lastly, let's finish this up with a little biohacking ideology. Cool term, right? If you are looking to take advantage of these protocols for reasons other than weight loss, this is where it gets interesting. I personally look for different ways to keep my glucose tolerance as tuned as possible. I look to keep my insulin sensitivity high and longevity pathways activated. Things such as sirtuin activity, autophagy, the glymphatic system, AMPK, to name a few. This stuff right here is where I spend a lot of my time. The data suggests that the longer you embark into a fast, the more these specific pathways ramp up. For example, our self-cellular recycling process called autophagy typically takes 30 to 36 hours of fasting before it really kicks into gear. Now, if we're exploring how we can maximize the benefits of these pathways in the most efficient ways possible, over the course of a week, would it be more beneficial to perform alternate day fasting, which if you assume for 3 of those 7 days, you're fasting for about 42 hours, and a process like autophagy really kicks in between 30 and 36, so let's say 33 hours. That gives you 7 to 9 hours of autophagy time over those 3 days. So that's looking like 23-ish to 30 hours over the course of the week. But if you implement what I call a 5 and 2 OMAD, which means you eat 1 meal a day, 5 days a week, and then you have 2 consecutive days of fasting, that essentially means you are performing a intermittent or prolonged fast for 65 to 70-ish hours each week. You subtract your 33 hours that it takes to get into autophagy mode, and now you're sitting at 30 to 35 hours of autophagy time each week. And you get to eat for 5 days, and you only fast for 2 days instead of eating every other day, making you a lot more efficient in that fasting time. Instead of breaking it up into 3 separate fasts, you do 1 big fast and you get a little more autophagy time, metabolically, hypothetically, and every other thingally speaking. The question is, does this all matter? And quite frankly, we don't know. Fasting is such a powerful prescription that we just don't know the right dose for. See the fun stuff that I spend all night thinking about? So the first thing that I would recommend you asking yourself before you jump into any protocol is why. Why are you doing it? What are you looking to get out of it? What are the underlying drivers? What's going to keep you going? Because if you don't have that, you're going to do it for a week and you're going to get bored and you're going to be done with it. This is too hard. This is annoying. I ate, but I also want to go out and have a couple of drinks. Oh no, 11 p.m. pizza. That kind of stuff. The compelling and attractive thing about these 2 protocols are the fact that they are pretty straightforward. They come with a set of clear and concise, simple rules. They make it easy. No calculus degree required. They may be a little extreme, but they are also super powerful. Kind of like my mother-in-law. I don't have a mother-in-law. Just thought it'd be a good joke. See ya.